communities, the Hazara communities around the world, welcome to the Hazara Pioneers Library at Mechidtv in Quetta Valley. Story of the Vizier's daughter has been brought to you so far. 5 chapters have been presented. Pioneers were people of sport. They were gamesmen. They were sports people. They had sportsman spirit. They could compete any game, especially the martial games and the martial arts. A people whose legacy originates, at least in the recent history, in the 19th century and 20th century, during the Great Game, and then the Cold War, and then now the proxy war. A people whose destiny is titled so, War and Migration. Why are the Hazara people scattered around the world? Because they have been suffering from one pain, war and migration, generation after generation. But the generation of the Hazaras in Balochistan are the generation of the Hazara pioneers. As the stories should not be forgotten, because they are our cultural legacy, mirasi farhangi. Ina intangible mirasi farhangiya. تعلقش قد روحية، قد مورالة، قد كاركترة، قد مايندا، قد ايدنتيتية، قد ناراتيفا، قد ستورية، كونكشني، درونية، قلبية، روحية. So in the last 5 chapters, we reached here that in an envoy of 3 people from the Mir of Hazaras and the Vizier of Hazara, they are, after a negotiation, the 3 people are sent forward to Kabul so that in response to Amir's letter, what are they going to offer? And here the story of the Vizier, Hussain, and his daughter Gul Begum as its focus, including his wife. So chapter 6, Cuckoos and Hedge Sparrows. Hussain had left home with a light heart, full of ambitious designs. Gul Begum را بیدیم بخالیم که یک بین ازنامی تر بین هزاره و افغان اگر بیترک marriage شونه خیلی خوب بشه. Full of hope, he returned dejected, hopeless. به یک جمله کاملا فیصله موشه که چیز کار شده کابل که رفتنه. خیلی روحیه شاد رفته بود، خیلی دیق پس آمد. Gul Begum saw something of all this in the far distance. She guessed it by the way he sat his horse. She knew it when he greeted her 2 miles from their village, where she had gone to meet him. He seemed pleased to see her, and she knew that her little attention in meeting him had not been thrown away upon him, though he said not a word upon the subject, and took not the faintest pains to conceal his low spirits from her. There was, however, no trace of disappointment in his manner when he rode up to the tower, where he dismounted. On the contrary, he greeted everyone with effusion, Salam alaikum, khubastin, janj minjora bakhair, and was particularly gracious when he unloaded the pack pony. Asbiki barkadat urki khalikat, here is a khilat, coat of honor, official present for you. He said to his cousin, unfastening a parcel containing a coat of purple cloth edged with gold braid. The Amir gave it to me, but I told him it would to hand it on to you as a chief of this subdivision of our sultanate. You have a better right to it than I. Janabi Mir Sahib irishumo babshin khub alam masha. It's a fine garment, Wali Muhammad, grinning. I wonder how I shall look in it. Put it on him, Gul Begum, his cousin replied, and let us see. Ah, none of your tricks with me, the little man said, almost blushing at the idea of putting on anything so smart. Such robes are not for me. Na. But Gul Begum thought it a great joke and insisted, and he, not altogether displeased, allowed himself to be dressed up. Though, truth to tell, he looked, when he had got it on, more grotesque than ever, not unlike a monkey on a barrel organ, the most marvelous of human inventions, never even having heard of such a thing, so that simile did not strike her. But something else must have, for she burst into such screams of laughter that Shireen and her mother and all the rest of the Vizier's family came rushing to see what was the cause of such merriment. Now that it was once on, her uncle was in no wise disposed to lay his newly acquired property down, but strutted about in it to the immense admiration of all but Gul Begum and her father, who had exchanged mischievous glances and still continued laughing. You've got the credit of being a wise man, Ghulam Hussein's wife said. Addressing her husband when they had gone indoors. But I think you must keep your wisdom for the chief's counsels. How so? He asked good-humoredly. What advantage do you expect to get from Wali Muhammad? By giving him that coat. Many are the things I've seen go from this house to that, but there is never even an old shoe that I've seen come from that house to this. This was. Oh, that's it, is it? I might have guessed so as much. Would you really have liked to see me made a laughing stock of before the whole village? Who's being made a laughing stock of? His wife went on. It's you that have made a laughing stock of yourself, giving your good clothes away and wearing your old ones. I only give away what I would never have dreamt of wearing. Her husband replied quietly, when would you wish me to appear in such a coat? Why? At Darbar, of course. At Darbar? In a coat given me by the enemy of our country? That would look strange, would it not? To have refused it would have been to insult the giver. And so bring the present unsatisfactory state of affairs to a more speedy head. I could not have done that, but to wear it, that's another thing. To wear it would imply gratification. Pleasure in the gift. No, I could not have worn it, even had it been a suitable thing to wear in our mountain home. Then you might have given it to one of your own household. Who could have worn it and enjoyed it? She went on, a little petulantly. There's Gul Begum here. Her father turned and looked at the girl half regretfully. Or me, her husband looked at her and smiled a little scornfully. Perhaps it would have done well for me in the winter. It's a good, thick, warm coat. Did you notice it, Gul Begum? It is lined with Bukhara silk. Yes, I noticed, the girl said, but it's not a woman's coat. It would have looked ridiculous on one of us. Now, if it were not that he looks so foolish in it, it is just the thing for my uncle, the chief. Ghulam Hussain had left the room and now returned with his hands full of parcels. Leave Wali Muhammad's coat aside, he said, and you can make what you like of these. Here is a stuff for coats for you all and to spare. And while the women were gloating over their newly acquired treasures, the vizier went out and joined a group of men who had already assembled in the courtyard to hear the result of the mission. All that actually transpired was that the Amir had granted the envoys several public interviews. When they had sat at one end of the long room, while he had sat on his couch at the end of the other. That he had been gracious and courteous, but had also been firm. The Hazaras, he said, were excellent, useful, hardworking people, but whose value he appreciated and whom he was most desirous of having as friends. But they were aliens. And therein, no doubt, lay the cause casus belli. They had been planted in Ghor, part of the territory proper of Afghanistan. By aliens who had retreated into the region from which they had sprung, leaving these cuckoos behind. There they had lived and multiplied in the land of the Afghans without even owing allegiance to the prince whose territory they occupied. Other aliens, taking advantage of the disjointed conditions in which the country had been for centuries, had done the same thing. The Hazaras were by no means the only offenders. Nor were they serious offenders. The Amir had laughed and joked and told them they had been wise and had done well. But the time had now come when all this was to be set right. This state of affairs had been proved disadvantageous to the cuckoos as well as to the hedge sparrows. Misali, as the Afghan hedge sparrow, unlike the feathered one, had resented the strangers and had shown fight, so he, the Amir, the generous, the wise, having leisure now to devote to this important question, had reviewed the whole matter in his mind and had decided that an alternation must be made and that for the future there was to be but one ruling sovereign in the country of Afghanistan, one capital and seat of government, one military center, and in consequence, of course, one royal treasury. The cuckoos were, however, to be allowed to retain the nests in which they had established themselves so long ago, provided, of course, they proved themselves loyal subjects to the lawful owners and therefore worthy of the considerations shown them. بزینا بیگانگا مرغای بیگانه کیمدن مثلا دزی منطقه اینجی علی کل المدل خجور کردن گونسله خجور کردن آشیانی خجور کردن باشه نمینجی اما باید تابع باشه. But they would now be required to pay rent. اینجا میدونی کرایه خانه از ماه کرایهش بیدین دیگه. In the form of taxes for the land and houses which they occupied. Nothing could be fairer. These taxes, moreover, would be used for their own benefit, for the making of roads through their own country, and for the support of an army and police for their own protection. It had all sounded so plausible that the third member of the Hazara mission to Kabul could detect no flaw in the argument. Same nafar mtr mandat muguft rasmi wala rasmi. He and only shook his heavy head, wisely saying, "True, true." Ghulam Hussain said nothing, but wrote on a piece of paper requesting a private interview with His Majesty, when neither Afghans nor the other two Hazara envoys should be present. He received for answer that his request should be considered. Sayyid Mir Hassan said nothing, so it was taken for granted that his feelings were friendly and that he was disposed to follow the lead given by his companions, and having been about an hour in the presence chamber, they were given leave to depart. بعد از یک ساعت مگه برخاست دربار برخاست میشه. Never had any of these three mountaineers been surrounded with so much magnificence. از کوهستان هم تازه نه حیران من دی چرخم محل جور کده. The Sayyid moved on in front, little affected by it. The third member of the mission was lost in wonder. And perhaps admiration, who knows, as he stood in front of a handsome pier glass and contemplated his own squat little figure. That was all he saw of the magnificence of an Eastern court. But it was quite sufficient. He was deeply impressed. Ghulam Hussain gazed everywhere. Saw everything and dreamed an ambitious dream. As he stood thus for a moment lost in thought, a tall, thin man wearing the usual Afghan court dress came up to him and, unnoticed by anyone, whispered something in his ears. Little harm would have been done, however, had anyone noticed or had even caught what he said. It was only this: "Come to my house tonight after evening prayers. My servant will be at the door of your house and will conduct you." Ghulam Hussein's heart beat quickened and he held his head higher. Here was his chance. This man, whoever he was, must have received instructions to take him to the AMIR. And once there, what might not be This was just what he wanted. He went home with the others, but was very silent during the few hours that intervened between his return from Darbar and the hour for which the next appointment had been made. He was thinking, turning over in his mind every conceivable course that would be open to him. As usual, however, when the time came, the offers made him were just such as had never entered his head. إنالي غلام حسین منتظره که کی قد امیر عبدالرحمن روبروی میشه تنها 1 to 1. ایده فکر موشه که چی کار کنی گل بیگون را اینجی ارسی کنی قد زینا در کابل بازی امنامان شونه بازی سلطنت قایم شونه باز حضرا و افغان یک شونه باز گل بیگون منتر اولاد کنه باز اولاد زوکسته باز سلطانی حضرا شونه سلطانی کل سلطنت دیگه یک جای میشه دی فکره و هزار رقم فکر دیگه اما وقتی که اونجا میرسه چیزهایی را آفر میشه که اصلا در فکرش نبود و چی بوده باشه؟ و چپتر 7 او را سبا برای شما نورزوار پیشکش کنه باکلو در یاد باکلو در یاد جوانهایی که جوان مرد بودن بعد از این ستوری و سلوار کردن دوباره زندگی را پیش بردن و اگر حاضر امروز داد و فریاد منم اگر حق زندگی بیدی مرا بیل که من اقلا زنده خو باشم حق زندگی رو تو میخوایی تو زنده ای خود خور حق داده زندگی چیه؟ چی رقم میبینی زندگی را؟ پیش پای سیلنی دوراندیشی ریشه را در نظر داره گذشته را در نظر داره از تاریخ یاد میگیری. You see what I'm talking about, teenagers and also girls and boys, wherever in the Hazara communities in the world you may be. This is the message of the Hazara pioneers who rose again. They came back to life and they lived a life, honorable life. So if there is no honor, there is no life. And if there is no life, there is no right to life. Thus, Nawrozawar says, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. Hay kido Nawrozawar, hay kido Nawrozawar.